Okay. Day two, Mishlei 1435, last morning Mishlei of the season. Ratzon melech le'eved maskil ve'evrasa tiyeh mevish. Okay, so we translated this. I actually want to re-examine this. The favor, desire, or will of a king is towards an intelligent or discerning servant. I'm going to actually uncross this out in case we need it again. And his anger will be upon an embarrassing, and then there's a, sorry, his anger will be an embarrassing, right? So you have to add in the words, embarrassing person or an embarrassing servant. And then there should probably be a preposition in there. Most of them are say his anger will be upon an embarrassing person. Okay, fine. There's a translation oversight we had that I discovered, but we'll review first. Okay, so our questions were, what is the decision-making scenario? Is this specifically in front of or in service of a king, or can it be extended beyond this? What is an Eved Maskil? What does Eved mean in this context? What does Maskil mean? Is Seichel limited to his role as Eved, or is he a Maskil in general? And this just happens to be an Eved scenario. What does Ratzon mean? For what kind of Melech are we talking about? Is this every king, or is it a certain kind of king? Also, king in what capacity? Leader, judge, person with absolute power. How literal? How far beyond literal does king extend? 5, why does a king's favor extend to an Evan Maskil? Sorry, why does a king favor an Evan Maskil? 6, what's the Havmina, or is this really true? Okay. 7, what does Mevish mean in this context? Is this a Mevish in general, or specifically an Evid Mevish? And Mevish to whom? Because we noted that it doesn't say Evid Mevish, it just says Mevish. 8, why is a king's wrath on a Mevish? 9, how are Evid Maskil and Mevish opposites? It should be foolish Evid as opposed to Evid Maskil, or Evid Nichbad as opposed to Evid Mevish. Who is the intended audience? Is it the king, the servant, or someone else? What is the practical decision-making advice? And then stylistic questions. Why is the first half expressed without any tense? And the second half says tihiyeh. And then 13, what do we make of the lack of preposition in the second half? Okay, so we had one solid approach and one solid idea, which we weren't sure if it was an approach to the pasuk. So the solid approach, I'm going to say in my own words, not just read this, is that it's basically talking about how to be a good subordinate. And I'm using the word subordinate because I think it works for an Eved and a Melech, but also anyone in a job where they're like deferring to someone who's calling the shots. So the fool thinks that obedience is the main quality he should go for, and he I guess, sorry, no, we said there's 2 mistakes that an Eved can make, a subordinate can make. One is being insubordinate, in the sense of like not factoring in the Ratzon of the Melech, and taking things into his own hands in a way that undermines the king's Ratzon. The second is by being slavishly obedient, where you are not deviating even when this is going to be detrimental to the king. Okay, so that type of Eved thinks he's doing well, but really it's only a matter of time before he ends up causing busha to the king or to himself. But ultimately, I think to the king is going to be the most important thing. And I didn't say this explicitly yesterday, but I think the reason why it's focusing on busha is because king is the Melech al Kavod. I mean, I know that's about Hashem, but a king is the highest position of kavod, and the thing that the king cares about most is going to be kavod. Even if he cares about power the most, his power is contingent on his kavod, so he's going to care about his kavod. So if you bring shame to the king, then that's going to be very bad, and that's why it's highlighting the consequence in terms of Mevish. And then Isaac also said that the mistakes and the successes of the subordinates are attributed to the king. So that's why it's going to get back to him eventually. Okay, but how do you be a good Eved? Is being an Eved Maskil, a discerning Eved, discerning, intelligent Eved. I think this might be why he uses a word that can mean both, which is that you are an Eved, you do subordinate yourself to the king's goals, but you also use your discernment to make independent decisions when that's going to be in line with the king's greater goals. And you have that independence, and that's really the type of person the king's going to value in the long run, and you also avoid the busha. So I think that captures the first idea, right? Am I missing anything? Okay. Then Ariel's idea was about about a subordinate who makes mistakes. and views mistakes as like the ultimate cause of failure, or no, as the ultimate like bad, the ultimate evil. So he's going to either try to conceal them from his boss, or he's not going to look into them on his own. But then that's just going to, if you don't address those mistakes, it's going to lead to consequences one way or the other. But a king is going to like it if an Eved makes a mistake and then like investigates it. And now, as I say this, I realize, yeah, it's a good idea, but I don't think it has anything to do with the pasuk. So, yeah.
Why do you think that?
Well, where does it talk about mistakes in terms of the learning from mistakes and stuff? And then the same question I had yesterday, which is why focus specifically on this this scenario? It seems like if the idea is really about learning from mistakes, talk about that idea in general.
Yeah, I thought I answered that yesterday.
It
comes to a melech,
yeah,
you're more
higher stakes.
It's higher stakes.
Yeah, I don't think that's enough to warrant its own pasuk. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good idea though. Okay. So here's the oversight we had. Okay, there is one more meaning of ratzon, and I think appeasement. Yeah. Do you see that in the Mefarshim?
No, I thought of it yesterday.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So ordinarily, so this is like ritzeh, right, or ritzui, right? We could have gotten it from the pasuk because that is an opposite of evra, okay, of like anger and appeasement, and I saw this in the Mefarshim, and where they get it from is the next pasuk, okay, which is again classic mistake. It's not even a mistake. It's just like we don't look at it. Is that these aren't real prakim, right? So the next pasuk says ma'ane rach yashiv chema udvar etzev yale af. A soft or a gentle reply turns back wrath, but a provocative statement brings up anger. Okay, so a lot of the Mefarshim tied the two together, which is why I think someone noted that the page of Mefarshim there is very sparse. I think because the Meiri ties them together. Okay, so let's start with the Metzudas. Metzudas David. I think he takes that approach also. So he says, "Benakel yisrate hamelech le'eved maskil." So the king will be appeased by the Eved Maskil easily. Ki af im yichos alav, because even if he gets angry at him, yisratelo, he will become appeased to him. Bavur rov sichlo, because of his great intellect. Ava al Eved hanimsa bo kol davar busha, this is a weird definition, but regarding an Eved in whom can be found every shameful matter, lefi rov hasichlus evraso alav shmura netzach. Due to his abundant, his great foolishness, then the king's wrath on him will be preserved forever. Okay, so he's saying that this is about basically this. What's the scenario according to him? Yeah,
with an angry king, the intelligent person will be able to appease him.
Right. I think this is not just an angry king. It sounds like it's a king who's angry at the Eved, right? Because af im yichos alav Yisratza low, and the other one is if he's aversa alav. Yeah, right. So if you anger a king, then if you're an Eved Maskil, then you'll be able to appease him. But if you're an Eved with kol davar busha, then the Evra will last, right? Yeah, so that's an interesting idea. So what's the how does that work, and what's the idea? Yeah.
Maybe you could think that maybe like the Eved will think, if he like makes it out of this, like he makes a mistake, and then I think I'll just make it out of this scenario. The king will be like, the king won't like kill me or whatever it is, and then I'll be fine. Whereas even if the king like not really forgives him, but like lets him go, that doesn't necessarily mean that the next time he does it, it's like a blank slate. Like he's still gonna remember what happened. And then whereas for the Eved Maskil, even when he makes a mistake, the king's gonna remember all the good he's done. It's not gonna be like he's like if the Eved Mavish and the Eved Maskil both make the same mistake, those aren't really the same situation.
Okay, right.
Even if it's the same mistake.
Okay, right. Yeah. So tell me if this is a different idea. What I was going to say is that when I think this is an idea in anger in general, but like anger is provoked by an incident, but it calls into question the whole person, right? Like you get angry at the person, even if the thing angered you. So the Eved Maskil does something that angers the king, but now the king looks at the entire track record or entire history or the entire character of this Eved and assesses the value, and then looks at the provoking incident in light of the entire person. Whereas, so with the Eved Maskil, he'll recognize his value, but with the when he looks at this Eved who like, fumbled and like messed up the king's schedule or whatever, and the king missed an important like appointment with the king of Denmark. I don't know, whatever kings do these days. Then like he looks back at this Eved, he's like, this guy's an idiot, and I think it also like, in both cases, he kind of projects into the future of like, this is just going to happen again, and so it like creates this permanent basis. Whereas if you look at the Evan Moskill, you're like, okay, this was one incident, but like, this is not going, this is not reflective of who he is and not reflective of who he's going to be. Is that different than what you're saying, or same, or?
I think it's similar.
Okay, yeah. I have an example, which was I got in trouble once in high school. So I went to Northwest Shiva High School in 11th and 12th grade, and it was like the best educational experience ever. And in 11th grade, I had only good teachers. And then in 12th grade, I had one bad teacher, and I made a very provocative like anti-curricular remark in my what do you call my an assignment, and she got really mad. And I remember hearing about it. I don't know how I heard about this afterwards, but I heard about the faculty meeting where they were like, where she was like, I guess she had brought the complaint to them, and like Rabbi Fox and everyone, they were talking about it. And like they said, this is a really, really, offensive remark to make, but like, this is Match Naywise, and like, it's an anomaly. And they just basically like, I think they made me apologize to her, but then they like just, they just let me off. Whereas, I can definitely speak from experience being on both sides as a student, watching other students, and then as a teacher. Like, if you have a Talmid Hanimsa Bo Kol Devar Busha, and they do something to upset you, you just look at this person and you're like, this is just going to keep happening again. Like, so, I think this is just a phenomenon with anger. So that's the practical takeaway here. So what's the practical takeaway other than being Evan Moskill? It doesn't have to be one practical takeaway, but just
I think there's also a middle ground.
Yeah.
Like, even if you can't be another Moscow, whether you're not like a sweet talker or you're not able to appease a king, like you can just avoid being Nimtza Bo Kol Devar Busha.
Right. It's a good motive for avoiding Nimtza Bo Kol Devar Busha. That's true.
I think there's like
Yeah.
a wide gap.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
I think also from if we were in the shoes of the Malach, I think also we could recognize this. And often I think it could go too far, and we'll just
Right.
be biased towards
That's true.
this guy badly. We know that.
Right. That is true. Right. So if you're the king, you should be aware of this phenomenon when you get angry. And I feel like, this is probably also a thing I imagine with parents that have a child who is relatively well-behaved and relatively, badly behaved, that they will be prone to this phenomenon of like going overboard in the anger about a particular thing when the particular thing doesn't warrant that, but it's like the whole track record comes to mind, and then they're comparing this kid to another kid. That's a good idea. Yeah.
I have a different idea.
Yeah. Different idea or different application?
Different idea on the system.
Oh, sorry. Let me just go one more application, which is that I think that you as the Eved should be aware, or you as a human being who someone might get angry at should be aware of this phenomenon, because I think many times when someone is angry at you, you attempt to justify it or to defend yourself based on the particular thing. But you have to be aware that even if the angry person is not aware of it, that they're factoring in your whole history, So you have to like, in your attempts to appease them, you have to factor that in and like, and not ignore it. And let's say this is especially true of a Baal Tshuva. I don't mean Baal Tshuva in the halakhic sense, but like if you did have a bad track record and then you like get your act together, depending on that person's relationship with you, there might be a lingering track record that you now need to address. that like they that they're operating based on, even though in your mind it's history. Yeah, Isaac, you have another application?
I just have an example of this that
Sure.
that I experienced this where someone was upset at me for something that in a way that was like disproportionate to the situation, to like the immediate situation, and Aviva saw that and was like what the heck, why is this person getting so upset at you about this? And I said, like, in like the particular instance didn't warrant it, but because I had a history of having this problem with this person, then like whatever the particulars were, and because we had a history of that, then it made sense that they were interpreting that as a continuation of that trend, as opposed to a one-off thing.
Okay, right. That's I think a good example, because sometimes it does make sense from the other person's perspective, or at least there's a good argument for it. I was also going to say something else based on what you said. Oh yeah, this might be going a little bit too far in terms of our analysis, like too much psychologizing. But why do you think the person, like, why don't people just look at the action in isolation? Like psychologically, why? Like I'm saying rationally, like there might be a reason why they look at your whole track record, but I'm saying psychologically, why are we prone to looking at the entire person and all their qualities?
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just how we're wired.
You can answer that and never learn anything about psychology. You could give the answer for anything. I'm asking why.
Yeah, I know that's
right.
I mean, I just what psychological factor is causing it. That's the question.
Right.
You're basically asking why should we look at negative things more opposed to like positive things?
No, I'm saying if someone makes a mistake and you get angry at the mistake, why isn't your anger dictated by the mistake? Why do you look and see what all the bad qualities of this person are? If you're rational about it, you would just look at the thing, right?
I mean, I'd say even from like a rational perspective, it makes sense to it makes sense in general to extrapolate trends about things that happen, like
right. So I think that is a rational cause. I'm wondering if there's also an irrational cause.
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm trying to say is I think there's a rational reason for psychologically people to jump to making trends. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I think some people like to be angry, or like even if you don't like to be angry.
Yeah.
In a vacuum, like when you're angry, like you want to like get it all out and like continue your anger. So you'll find
gives you a good excuse
outside of you'll find the excuse to be angry.
Yeah.
If the particular moment.
Yeah, that's good. And by the way, you'll see when people do this, like again, let's say like they let's say the person like doesn't show up to a meeting or whatever, right? And you're like, and they don't show up to a meeting, and like they're mean to their kids, and they're sloppy, and they're like it's just like you just what does that have to do with anything? But yeah, you're on a roll. Like it's fun. Yeah.
Does that have to do with also like if the guy is like intelligent, then that won't happen? Like how
if the object of the David.
Yeah.
I mean, if you heed this pasuk, then yeah, I mean, but I think the pasuk is because people are prone to doing this. Even in others like this. It's a good question.
Because the pasuk saying if you do have a good track record,
that's true.
It's not gonna happen.
Right, that's true.
How does that answer the why question also? I mean, it's just asking another why question, like why do people view?
No, he is answering it because he's saying that there is a pleasure in anger, and that once you give a person an opportunity to indulge in a pleasure, they will take it.
And people feel pleasure in being angry.
Yeah, raging. Right, there's raging is a thing that and if you want examples of this, go on the internet.
Can't you ask why the people feel pleasure on it also?
Yeah.
So why are we asking?
That's a fundamental.
That's
a fundamental. Yeah, that's fundamental. That's fundamental, which is that that, the premise of Mishlei, as Sadigon says, which is also the premise of Freud, is that people are attracted to pleasure and they want to avoid pain. And if you say why, that we can't answer. Yeah.
I mean, if it's about the pleasure, then I think if with the seven maskil, that's like a conflicting pleasure, because having a good effort like that will bring the king fortune, success.
That's interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that might be a rapid fire calculation that they make. Yeah, I have a different answer to address that, but also an answer for this in general. Again, I don't think there's only one answer to this because I think anger is very multifaceted. But I think part of anger, this is true of all emotions in a way, but anger is accompanied by a drive to rationalize that you want to feel right. Okay, meaning other emotions, when you do an avera and you give into taiva, you also want to feel that you're justified. But I'm saying like anger is davka in terms of I'm right and he's wrong, and nuances are an obstacle of that. So like people will pave over the nuances in order to feel totally right, and any arguments they can muster to feel that I'm the guy who is right and that's the guy who's wrong is is good. So like it like generates like an ad hominem attack thing, like this guy is a loser, this guy, like I'm the guy who's right, and similarly, and I think this is related but distinct, is people want there to be a good guy and a bad guy, and like if the anger was just about the action, then good guy and bad guy wouldn't be relevant. But because anger is often like, no, I'm the good guy, that's the bad guy, so then all the things that are relevant to classifying this guy as a bad guy are gonna be brought up.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask you because I remember one shiur you gave about Esau's not necessarily a bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that was said, I was gonna contrast it to here. One of the things that you said was that most people they're not nuanced. They just view things as just generally good and bad.
Yeah.
So is that also just a fundamental, or is that like, or there's a reason for that also?
Of viewing things as like in black and white categories.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I was the reason why I was going to contrast because like what I was saying before about how people what did I say? How the hobbyman that I had that wasn't necessarily fundamental, but I mean
that people are hardwired.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
So like I guess in my mind, like what's the difference between that and this? I'm just trying to understand.
Right. That's a good question. Yeah, about why people oversimplify into good and bad. Yeah.
That doesn't seem like a fundamental. That just
Yeah. I mean, I am very, very, very heavily influenced by Rabbi Sachs right now because I'm just getting through my Chazara of.
I get it. I'm influenced by Rockefeller.
Yeah. What is it called? I always get not in God's name. Yeah, non-God's name, confronting religious violence. So he actually says the answer has to do with Yichud Hashem. He says that the answer to why people oversimplify has to do with Yichud Hashem, and he basically says that there's two basic things. There's Yichud Hashem and there's dualism. Dualism are all the types of views where like there is a everything is divided into good and evil, and like there's two fundamental forces in the universe, and so those people are going to tend to, or I mean that drive in man, and it is a drive in man. I mean, because I'll talk about this all the time. Shtei Rishuyos, and Zoroastrianism was the big religion that catered to that. Now, and then later on it was Christianity of like God and Satan. But there is a drive in a person about their orientation towards reality in general that is going to make them prone to classifying people as good or bad. I don't know if that's a soul cause. I think evolutionarily also, like, it is advantageous evolutionarily of like, are you part of my group or are you a threatening force? And so people are very tribalistic in that sense. It's good. It's a question that bears more thought.
Yeah, I guess what I'm really getting at is like, how do you know what are fundamentals versus not? I mean, how do you know?
Right.
When do you say, oh, you shouldn't ask the why versus? At least in this area, and like philosophy, but like here or someone else.
Right.
Here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that question is something that like, I mean, it's similar to the question in physics, right? Like how many fundamental forces are there in the universe? And like, there is an intuition that you want to go down to the unifying as much as possible, like, but yeah, that's a good meta methodology question about all chachma. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point that I think he was asking why people don't operate based on nuance, and
Yeah,
I think it's just practically. I think the intellect can see nuance, but emotions are not nuanced.
right.
And
Right.
so, if people are operating based on their emotions, then they're not going to be operating with nuance.
Right. But I think Ariel is asking, is that just hardwired, or is there a reason why emotions don't operate with nuance? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Ezra.
Maybe just to go further in that, like emotions in general are like seeking gratification. Let's say anger. You want to gratify your anger, but if you start thinking about this guy is sometimes good, sometimes not, it just removes the total gratification of the anger.
Yeah.
And I think all emotions are like that. So once you start making like chiluks, then you can't gratify.
Yeah, that's true, right? In other words, it's not like this is related to what Ezra to what. All right, now we're doing the same problem again. But Ezra Koppel's saying that there's a pleasure in anger, but part of the pleasure of anger and part of pleasures in general is it has to be unbridled. So once you bridle it with nuance, you can't enjoy it as much.
Yeah, there's like no gratification.
Yeah, right.
Which kind of wants me to circle back to my second interpretation.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, just before I do, can you turn to the last of Eved Alhamis book called the Ralbag?
Yeah, but if the anger is on an Eved in whom is found every shameful matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to maybe interpret differently by saying that maybe when a king confronts an Eved and he's angry, a mistake that the Eved can make is like he would just like kind of further the fuel on the king, and that in itself is like busha, like just you have to use your mind and know when to poke the bear even more. You know what I mean? Because you can't fall into a trap of getting to like a fight with an anger fight with the king or with anyone, because you have like a position, you want to justify what you did,
right?
And like that whole scene is very embarrassing.
So you're saying that the Eved, that the king's anger is going to be forever because the Eved is going to like further provoke.
Yeah, either he himself will get angry, or he's gonna just he's just going to justify his mistake,
right?
And you don't want to double down on your mistake. You're just furthering.
Okay, so I usually never do this, but because we're not going to come back to this until September, I think that's shot in the next pasuk. Okay, which is that. I'm not going to comment on the first half, but Devar etzev ya'ale af. I think my shot of ya'ale af means that. Oh, sorry. Definitely, this whole scenario in this pasuk is the anger is there, but a provocative statement will raise the anger because people feel the need to either attack back or to defend themselves or to minimize the other person's ego, say oh no, it's not really that important. Yeah. So the Eved's going to do stuff that's going to raise that.
It feels good.
It feels
right, like fighting,
yeah.
I don't know,
so here's the thing. I agree that that's a good interpretation of the phenomenon that Metzudas David is talking about. I don't see that in the Metzudas David's interpretation, because it sounds like he's saying that because of the Eved Maskil's rove seichel, that's why he'll make it easy to appease the king. Not even because the Eved does anything, just the king looks at the Eved and says, oh, this guy has rove seichel, and the other Eved is this guy has kol dvar busha and rove sichlus,
So you're not using the rove seichel as so you're not interpreting the pasuk to mean like how he's using his rove seichel?
No, I think Davka he's steering us away from that, because he's saying that I mean you could read it this way, but in other words, he's treating the Eved as okay, in other words, like this: who's the subject and who's the object in the pasuk? So Metzudas David is reading as the subject is the king, and the object is the Eved, and all the way he's talking about it is Yisratze Hamelech, Yisratze Lo. it's talking about how the king will react to this person, not what is the Eved going to do to appease the king, or what is the Eved going to do to provoke the king.
So it's just recency bias?
No, it's not just recency bias. In fact, we're saying my idea from before was the opposite of recency bias, which is that it's going to bring up the whole history of the Eved and the whole projected future of the Eved. In other words, he's going to be able to overcome the recency bias in the Eved Maskil case. And in the Eved Mavish case, it's also going to override the recency bias because it's going to bring up all the the history.
Okay.
Were you going to say something earlier? Yeah.
If this is just an idea about anger, why is it expressed through a melech and meta?
Right. So that's a fair question. I still think that the scenario here, I'm tempted to think that even though it's talking about the king, the advice is for people who are in a position where they're angering someone who they're working for. And I think this is one of those many Mishlei pasukim where king is just a stand-in for like people in power, and that is the case where, like, I don't think you have to go and say that it's Davka, a king who has really high stakes. I think it scales, and that is a thing that, like, whether it's it starts off with the parent and the child and the parent, and goes to all cases. Yeah.
I think for also a king feels more entitled than an average person.
That's also true, right?
And I think that's what
and bigger ego,
yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah.
So all the causes for anger stem from.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Let's take a completely different reading of the pasuk. Now, this one I was shocked by, because I don't know Dikduk, but I think this is Dikdukically weird. Okay, Ralbag. Okay, and the Ralbag is on a separate page there. And tell me if your Ralbag is different. Ralbag says, oops, yeah, thank you. Ralbag says, Ratzon Melech Hul Eved Maskil Vizaris. So the Ratzon of a king is towards an Eved who is Maskil and Zaris. Okay, so let's not translate Maskil for a second. Zaris has like alacrity, however you want to translate that. Okay. The Evras Hamelech hu be'eved Uchar Hatenua uboshish laleches basher yeshulach. So the wrath of a king is towards an Eved who is delayed in movement and is delayed in doing what he is sent to do. Like, what's Boshish Moshe, right? The people were angry because they thought that Moshe was delayed in coming down, So he's learning Mavish as a stalling Eved. Okay. And then I'm gonna go ahead. I don't know if this is the same idea, but let's just look at the I think the Malbim also reads it this way. Malbim's not in your packet. He gives a more specific definition of Evra, though. But he says, actually, let me just do this. It's bigger. Okay, so the Malbim says, Hamaskil who has Zaris b'malachto, right? So he also gets this Maskil idea. This Zaris idea. V'ose b'seichel lahashkif al hatachlis. Okay, so he gives another interpretation. He acts with seichel to survey or to look upon the ultimate goal or the ultimate objective. V'hamevish hu hamis acher. The Mavish is the guy who delays himself, who bilti mashkif la'akriso, and is not looking at the ultimate consequence, the ultimate end. Ukeshihi avadim lamelech she'avodaso hi avodas haklal. And when there are avadim to the king, whose avoda is the avoda of the entire collective, yimale ratzon al hamaskil, his will be fulfilled by the maskil. I don't know al hamaskil. I think it's by the maskil, but I'm not sure. Ubavur hamevish yismale evra al kol avadav. And about the delaying Eved, then he'll become filled with wrath against all of his servants. Shezeh geter ha'evra. Now he defines evra here. Shemiskatif gam al habilti chotes. So he says the difference between kas and evra. Actually, we'll read this in the Biur HaMilos. He says, geter ha'evra, the definition of evra, shemismala kas gam al mi shelo chata, is getting angry at people who did not sin. Okay, so that's we weren't taking that meaning because we're not the Malbim. And he says, shezeh geter ha'evra shemiskatif gam al bilti chote v'zeh musar haskel. And then he goes in and talks about God. Okay, but let's just talk about this in general. So I don't necessarily think we need to interpret the Malbim right now. let's just actually go back to the Ralbag, that this is talking about an Eved who has Zrizus versus an Eved who is delayed and procrastinates.
Dude, why is he using that example?
Well, he's reading the word Boshesh as late.
Boshesh can also be late.
Sorry, Mavish. He's reading Mavish as coming from Bashash, not from what is the actual
So how's he getting his rizus from
because he's saying that it's the opposite.
Or it's like intelligence.
from Haskell. So has he learned the first side of the pasuk?
Yeah, so he's saying by the way, just to say here, so everyone else is learning that Mavish comes from Bet Vav Shin. He's learning that it comes from Bet Shin Shin. Okay, right. So there's two different words, and he's inferring that maskil is just the opposite of Mavish. So if Mavish means delaying, then maskil must mean diligent. You know.
He's not changing his definition.
Yeah,
it means intelligent. It's just the subject is lateness, so he's intelligent about lateness.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. The other possibility I had in my mind, which I don't know, I just wanted to review Rabinu Yona's definition of Haskell is wait.
So it's 4 of us.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
right.
Sorry, I just lying. Arno saying C is right there. Just pointing at the screen. We're actually saying it's 4 above. But thank you both. Okay.
Like keep the 4 above personality guys right there.
Yeah. It's like the kid who shows the parent the picture book, like where the picture's facing the kid. See, you know. Yeah. Okay.
I'm surrounded by 5th graders.
Yeah. I think he has a good definition of seichel here. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, here we go. Inyan Haskell is hashgacha ve'iyun b'chol masav, is watching over and like looking into each of his actions. So like, what would be a good word for this for seichel? What's a good word for saying that you do each of your actions in a attentive way, like
Purpose.
Say again?
Diligence.
Yeah, diligent.
Conscientiousness.
Yeah, conscientious is good. Yeah, a conscientious Evan. So I think that could also be that and yeah, because diligent I would reserve for Zaris. That's or Charutz. What was it? Yeah, right. Yeah. So going back. So right. So according to Ralbag, we're talking about an Eved who is still Revenge Yona. We're talking about an Eved who is conscientious and diligent and timely, right? Versus an Eved who is sluggish and procrastinating and doesn't do what he's sent to do right away, right? So what's the idea there?
He's teaching how to hire someone.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
And also, we still have to ask the question why focus on the melech, right? And again, melech here I don't think means king. It means like anyone who's like calling the shots.
Also, it seems very obvious.
Yeah, right. But on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, I feel like I've heard people, especially people who are lazy and procrastinating, say, "Well, I got the job done, didn't I?" Yeah, you got it done a minute before it was due. So like, I think that is what I think there is a view that certain people who are charged with tasks have, which is as long as I get it done, that's the only important thing. And what this is saying is that how efficiently you get it done, or how slow you are, can bring up anger. Right. So like that's the question is like, what's the insight there? Yeah.
Are you saying that this is a case where even the slow guy does do it
eventually? Let's say that just because he doesn't say that he doesn't do it, right? Just says he's slow moving, right. And like he is in fact, I'll give you an example of this. I mean, I think I don't know how many of these people in New York here have had experience in states that are slower,
Oh,
right?
Bad.
Exactly, right. You know, so like if you go to, let's say in the deep south, or for me, like in Hawaii, like in Hawaii, they call it island time, you know, like, yeah, people just mosey on over something, you know,
Right.
so you know that they're getting it done,
No
but there's
sense of urgency.
yeah, exactly, right. So there's an anger. So the question is like, where does that stem from, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's like if you're depending on someone to do something, I think there's like anxiety. It's like even
Oh,
if
okay.
they usually get it done, it's
Yeah.
still frustrating.
Okay.
They're just, like, sitting around.
Okay, that's good. So one is that it creates space for anxiety, that if they haven't done it yet, there is, especially if you're talking about a task that is going to be over the course of like a long period of time, and you haven't seen them do anything yet, then there is anxiety that it won't get done. And anxiety is going to lead to blame. And since it's their fault, you're going to be pre-blaming them because of your anxiety. That's a good answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, also just like to add on to that, like you know, like if you're like an employee or like from Melech, like they may tolerate it for a little bit, but like at a certain point, like all that kind of compounds, yeah, and like you're gonna get fired, you're gonna get
right,
you're gonna,
right,
like,
right. The question
just to get it away with the
right. The question though is why should it matter at all, right? Because he's saying that this makes you angry, and you're saying lots of instances of this anger will get you fired. But I'm asking, like, what's the cause of the anger in general?
Yeah.
I think it also reflects a lack of care if you're like slow about.
Okay, right. So I think that's the perception, right? And the funny thing, and I say that's perception, is because
Not necessarily good.
right. In fact, it could be the opposite, right? Is that there are people who are deliberate about things because they don't want to rush it, or, you know. And I think this might be Musar Haskell, that if you are a person who takes their time, you should try to minimize making it look like you're not doing anything, you know, because they might get angry about it, right? Or convey to them why you're taking your time.
Right.
Yeah, right. But I do think you're right, is that it looks like it's not important to them, you know, and that's going to be an ego thing, that, oh, it's not important to, yeah.
Reminds me of the pasuk that we did last year.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, right. That's true. Yeah, that we'd probably get insight reviewing that. Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I think it's going to stem from, so we have two things. We have fear about the task not getting done, which is a practical grounded fear. And then there is an ego thing also, because I think there's also there is a positive pleasure. You know, shliach by definition is an extension of your will. So if you are, you know, sending someone to do something, it is your sense of accomplishment. And there's also like a positive pleasure in, like, my will translates into action, you know, and when that's frustrated, you know, then it like, it's a blow to the ego of, it's my will, how can you not do it? Like, you know, and again, and we know that the guy is doing it, but insofar as he's not, it's like there is a friction of, oh, it brings up the specter of like, oh, this guy has his own will, and that's like not something that the king likes to think about.
But
yeah.
Is a part of that idea like it's also a reflection of the king? Meaning, like, if he has subordinates doing that, it's like
that's also true, right? That is also true. That it could reflect badly on the king. That his job is not being done. Yeah.
I think in addition to the ego thing, if it seems like your effort doesn't care, I'll go back to what Michael was saying.
Yeah.
And you get worried about it not being done efficiently and
Right.
properly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's stop now, but let's just quickly review the two new ideas we got. Okay, so we got Metzudas David, who says that, you know, the pasuk is about anger. Okay, if you anger a superior, they will not just look at the provoking incident, but they'll call your whole track record into question and project your future track record. So if you have the record of an Eved Maskil, then that will insulate you from his wrath and make it easier for him to be appeased, because he recognizes your value. If you have the record of an Eved Mavish, the opposite will happen, plus all the reasons why anger goes to extremes. Okay, so we had the pleasure of raging, the tendency to what do you call it? There's a bit warm, like not plow over, but to like eliminate nuance, the impulse.
Pave over.
Say again.
Pave over.
Yeah, pave over. That was what I was looking for. Yeah, to pave over. Pave over. I was thinking steamroll. That's too specific. The ad hominem impulse. What else do we say for the anger? Why you get angry totally? Oh, the need to rationalize.
Also the self-entitlement ego.
Yeah, the ego, self entitlement, etc. Will take effect. Okay, right. So the practical advice for the king is to be aware of this phenomenon, to I guess moderate the anger rationally. Okay, the practical advice for someone who makes another person angry is to factor this in when trying to placate the king. Okay, then you've got the Ralbag, which is the this pasuk is about efficient shluchim and slow shluchim. The latter, even if they have good reason for being slow and deliberate, run the risk of angering their Mishlei, because in the delay, the delay will awaken fears that the task will not be completed, and the Mishlei will pre-blame and pre-rage because of that. B, the ego of the Mishlei is frustrated when it's not translated directly into action. C is the ego. His ego is also bruised by what appears to be a lack of prioritization. What else do we say? I feel like we had one more at least.
The reflection.
Yeah. The public perception of the task not getting done can reflect poorly on the king. Okay, that's good enough for now. Okay, good. Two new, completely new ideas. Yeah, completely new ideas, right? It's a different track than we had yesterday. Yeah, nice. Okay, good pasuk, good year, and to be continued. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, and chazak v'nis chazek for the artificial parak division. Okay, yeah.